Grayson, thank you very much for talking to us today, and especially thank you very much for letting us come into your studio. This is amazing to get to be here.
Yeah, I'm sorry it doesn't live up to the cliche of a studio. It's
What should it be like?
Well, it should all be covered in paint, you know, and there should be like half-finished masterpieces leaning against the wall.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us. The new show starts next week on Channel 4, and you've done some fantastic documentaries. This time around, you've got a 3-part series investigating modern masculinity. Why did you want to tackle that subject?
Well, it's just, you know, masculinity is behind most news stories. You know, most of the problems in the world, you sort of think, I wonder what they'd be like if men changed their behaviour. A lot of those sort of, you know, wars and catastrophes and corruption scandals and, you know, economic meltdowns, you wonder if they'd be different if men behaved differently. Mm-hmm. And so I think masculinity is a central issue because it underlies so many different other stories. And also, you know, being a transvestite myself, I have been very aware of gender since I was, you know, 12 or something. So it seemed like a no-brainer, you know. And also, you know, with the you know, there's a lot in the media these days about feminism, and so, you know, there's a lot of talk about gender, and I often think that masculinity is the hard one to talk about. You know, it's like it's because it's everywhere, literally. It's very hard to unpick from society because we've had a patriarchy for so long.
The dominant culture, yeah.
Yeah, that they have shaped the world in their image. And therefore to sort of say, well, that bit is definitely masculine, that bit isn't. You've got to really start thinking about how that works. And of course also men are now suffering from, you know, I think that, you know, a lot of men really, if they kind of examine masculinity, they'd be happier without some bits of it, if not all of it.
So the cage fighting episode, the first episode, is a really interesting one because I think we go into it as a viewer and you think that it's going to be about violence, it's going to be about aggression, but it very quickly becomes about something else. It becomes, you know, it's about depression, it's about fear, not things that men are comfortable talking about.
No, that's their problem. That is the central issue for masculinity, is the fear of appearing vulnerable or weak, because the big dilemma really is that, I mean, for all of us, you know, but men, the male version of it is there is this idealized version of what a man should be in the back of all men's minds. And he's trying to live up to that. And if he thinks he's failing in being that, then he's ashamed. And he thinks he's going to get rejected because he has failed that. So therefore he never talks about it because weakness will show that he isn't that. And I think that is the central thing. The men will have to realise that in talking about it and being a bit vulnerable, they're not going to die. They're more likely to die if they don't talk about it. You know, they think that it's so fearful that they'd rather die than admit weakness. And that just seems to typify what the central masculine dilemma, really.
One of the interesting things that you say in the third doc, I think you say, you know, as an artist, my job is to notice things. And I mean, that idea of being able to kind of zoom out and get a bird's eye view on a culture that you're living in as part of, I mean, that's a very difficult thing to be able to do, I think. And that's one of the things that fascinates me about this. How do you know when you've kind of zeroed in on something? Because some of it, and some of the most interesting bits about it, it's about identifying the thing that we all see, that we all recognise, but nobody's actually spotted it yet. Nobody's pointed it out, even though it's staring us in the face.
I think, well, the third episode is about men in the city, and, you know, as masculinity goes up the socio-economic scale, it becomes, and one of the interviewees says it, he says it becomes gentrified.
Yes. Which
means it's sort of more difficult to spot. So it's woven in to, you know, the texture of everyday life more. And so, and also, it's not question. It's not like someone being obviously violent or badly behaved, or, you know, being a criminal or something. It's like, you know, it's it's the way that it masks itself as common sense and normal. That's where you start looking. So I found myself increasingly looking at things that were quite banal, you know, and I was thinking, is that banality a manifestation of masculinity, you know, and is it a good or a bad thing, you know? And so it's like, you know, just something like the foyer of a business, you know, why were they all the same? You know, they're all beige marble and black leather and lots of this, and they sort of like, why are they all like this? They're like some bachelor pad, you know. And I just thought even in that, they're quite male.
Okay.
You know, and then you start sort of investigating. And there was a story in the media last year, wasn't there, about air conditioning being sexist, you know, because it's set to a bit too cold for most women. And so I think there's a sort of ongoing project to look at those sort of subtle inflections that actually have quite important repercussions in our society about the way that men think their view of the world is the view of the world. You know, as the feminists said in the 70s, objectivity is male subjectivity.
Mm-hmm. So, you're the default.
Yeah,
man
exactly.
Is the
default man.
And what do you think you discovered about yourself doing all this? What about your own? I think you said at one point, you know, that you're actually a pretty masculine person.
Oh, I am.
And more than you thought was one of the things that I think you remarked.
Yeah, more than I would have admitted to before. Now I'm happier to do it. I'm, you know, I display many of the traits that that men have. I think I've got pride around certain things, you know, that are very male, like my sort of fitness, or I'm very competitive, or I sometimes have to really check myself on my determination to be right about everything, you know, which is a very male thing, that certainty. And you want to kind of go, well, maybe, you know, and men have got to learn that, you know, being embarrassed, being caught out, being a bit hypocritical, changing your mind, you don't die. You know, you can do these things. And that's what men have got to learn to do. They've got to learn to change, you know, because they hold on to that role very rigidly, because they're given it very rigidly from birth, you know. And that sort of 5-6-year-old who says, I'm a man, and these are the rules, you must not wear pink, and, you know, play with girls, and you've got to have this XYZ, you know. It's very difficult for a lot of boys to sort of let go of that, because they like that. It's very well policed.
Do you think that that's getting easier now, and that people are starting to change those attitudes, or at least, you know, soften their attitudes?
Very slowly, I think. You know, the nice sons of the chattering classes, I'm sure, are allowed to play with Barbie dolls, and but I'm sure their mothers still do most of the childcare. You know, so I'm not expecting a revolution in gender anytime soon, but what men have got to learn to do is look forwards, because one thing I have, you know, one of the central concerns that I have with masculinity is that it's nostalgic. It's looking back to the idealized man that a lot of men have in their heads, most men have in their heads, that they're trying to live up to without realizing it, is old. Mm-hmm. Whereas idealized woman is forwards. It's like, in the future, we will be equal and as powerful as men, and we will be like this. And men are sort of going, oh, it's not as good as it used to be, is it, yeah. Men?
So do you think that accounts for all the kind of beards and the retro sort of masculinity that we see on display, and
I think the
way
beard
men present
thing
themselves? It's authenticity as well.
Yeah, it's authenticity. I mean, historically, it is connected with crises in what is seen as old school masculinity. I mean, beards were very big at the end of the 19th century because they feared that industrialization was taking away the strength of man, you know. But I think the beard this time was more of like a kind of rejection of the sort of cosmeticized consumer man. It was like, you know, we don't buy our masculinity. We just grow it. You know, we're folky naturals.
Now everyone's spending £25 on beard oil.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Well, capitalism will always market whatever's available, won't it?
Grayson, thank you very much for talking to us today.
It's been fun.
Cheers.